Social media is not just changing behavior, it is changing how human beings develop psychologically. Something feels different about people today. Attention feels weaker, anxiety feels constant, loneliness feels deeper, and many people feel emotionally exhausted without fully understanding why. But according to Jonathan Haidt in The Anxious Generation, this is not happening by accident. He argues that over the last decade, human development itself has been fundamentally altered by the transition from a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood. Not simply because phones are distracting, but because social media changed the environment human identity develops inside. Human beings were not designed to psychologically develop under constant digital exposure. For most of human history, people developed themselves gradually. Identity formed through real-world interaction, embarrassment, friendship, solitude, failure, conversation, silence. People could experiment socially without feeling permanently observed. They could fail privately, grow quietly, disappear for a while, change naturally. But social media changed that completely. Now identity is constantly visible, constantly evaluated, constantly compared. And slowly, human beings begin performing themselves instead of simply being themselves. Social media turned identity into performance. Jonathan Haidt repeatedly argues that social media created an entirely new social environment. One where status, comparison, judgment, and validation never fully stop. And the human nervous system was never designed for this. Because in real life, social pressure had limits. You went home, you rested, you disconnected. But now, the audience follows people everywhere, into their bedrooms, into their mornings, into moments that once belonged only to themselves. And eventually, many people stop experiencing life directly. They begin experiencing life through the imagined eyes of other people. Many people no longer ask, "What do I feel?" They ask, "How will this be perceived?" This is one of the deepest psychological shifts caused by social media. The self becomes externalized. People become hyper-aware of how they appear, how they sound, how they look, how their lives compare. And over time, identity becomes increasingly performative. Not necessarily fake, but fragmented. Because maintaining a public self all the time creates psychological tension. Especially when people no longer know who they are without an audience. A generation raised without boredom may never fully develop reflection. Jonathan Haidt argues that childhood fundamentally changed. Children once spent large amounts of time playing outdoors, exploring, arguing face-to-face, inventing games, solving problems socially. But now, many young people spend their developmental years inside highly stimulating digital systems. And one of the first things those systems eliminated was boredom. But boredom was never meaningless. Boredom created imagination, reflection, inner dialogue, creativity. It forced the mind inward. And maybe this is why so many people now feel uncomfortable the moment silence appears. The moment life slows down, they immediately reach for stimulation. Scrolling, refreshing, switching apps, consuming. Not because they truly want something, but because stillness now feels psychologically unfamiliar. In The Shallows, Nicholas Carr writes, "What the net seems to be doing is chipping away my capacity for concentration and contemplation." And maybe this is the hidden cost of endless stimulation. Not simply distraction, but the gradual erosion of reflection itself. Because a mind that is never still slowly loses the ability to deeply confront itself. The human nervous system was never designed to be socially evaluated all day long. One of the strongest arguments inside the anxious generation is that social media does not simply expose people to content. It places them inside a permanent social competition. And this changes people psychologically, especially young people whose identities are still forming. Jonathan Haidt points to dramatic rises in anxiety, depression, self-harm, and emotional instability, particularly after the rise of smartphone-based social media. Because platforms amplify social comparison continuously. Beauty, status, success, popularity, lifestyle, validation. Every scroll becomes an unconscious comparison. And eventually, people begin feeling as though they are constantly behind. Not good enough. Not attractive enough. Not successful enough. Not interesting enough. And the terrifying part is, many people no longer realize their self-worth is being shaped by algorithms. The algorithm does not just shape attention, it slowly shapes identity. Because algorithms learn what keeps human beings emotionally reactive. Outrage, novelty, insecurity, comparison, fear, desire. Not because technology is evil, but because attention became profitable. And over time, people begin adapting psychologically to systems that reward emotional reactivity instead of depth. The more life becomes performative, the less embodied it feels. One of the deepest ideas inside the anxious generation is that virtual life cannot fully replace real-world development. Human beings psychologically mature through risk, real interaction, physical presence, unstructured play, conflict, shared experiences. But digital life increasingly replaces lived experience with observed experience. People watch life more than they participate in it. They document moments instead of fully inhabiting them. Even emotions become performative. Experiences become content. Identity becomes branding. And eventually, people stop asking, "What kind of life feels meaningful to me?" They ask, "What kind of life looks meaningful online?" A distracted mind cannot deeply know itself. This may be the deepest consequence of social media. Not distraction, not wasted time, but fragmentation of the self. Because self-knowledge requires solitude, reflection, continuity of attention, silence. But social media trains the brain toward the opposite: constant interruption, constant stimulation, constant comparison, constant emotional noise. And slowly, people lose contact with their own inner world. Not because they are weak, but because modern digital environments make sustained inward attention increasingly difficult. Maybe the deepest cost of social media is not distraction. Maybe it is the slow disappearance of a private inner self. Jonathan Haidt's warning is not simply about screens. It is about human development itself. Because human beings need experiences that cannot happen through algorithms. Real friendship, real silence, real risk, real presence, real solitude. Moments where nobody is watching. Moments where identity does not need to be performed. Because maybe the part of you that truly understands who you are can only emerge in the moments where you are finally alone with your own mind.